Welcome back to the Vue 3 Beginner Tutorial series. In the previous episode, you learned how to respond to button clicks and keyboard events, pass arguments to methods, access the native event object, and use Vue's built-in event modifiers like prevent, stop, and once. In this episode, we're going to learn about computed properties. Up to this point, we've been storing our application's state using ref. But not every value in our application actually needs to be stored. Sometimes a value can be calculated from other reactive values instead. That's exactly what computed properties are designed for. Before we write any code, let's first understand what a computed property actually is. A computed property is a value that's calculated from other reactive values. To understand this better, let's compare it with a ref function. Unlike a ref, we don't assign or update its value manually. Instead, Vue calculates it for us. Whenever one of the reactive values it depends on changes, Vue automatically recalculates the computed value. Now let's see this in action by building our first computed property. Before we can create a computed property, we first need to import the computed function from Vue. Just like ref, the computed is a part of Vue's composition API. Since we'll also be using reactive variables, we'll keep the ref import as well. Next, I'll create two reactive variables. One will store the user's first name, and the other will store the user's last name. Right now, they're both empty strings because we want the user to provide those values through input fields. Now let's create two text inputs. Using vModel, each input is connected to one of our reactive variables. The first input updates first name, while the second updates last name. As the user types, Vue automatically keeps these variables in sync with the input fields. At this point, we're collecting the data we need, but we're not displaying anything yet. Now let's create our first computed property. Instead of using ref, this time we're using computed. The computed function accepts a function as its argument. The value returned from that function becomes the value of our computed property. In this example, we're simply combining the first name and the last name into a single string. Notice that we're using dot value when accessing both variables. That's because first name and last name are refs, and inside JavaScript, we access their values using dot value. At this point, full name always represents the latest combination of those two reactive values. Finally, let's display our computed property inside the template. Just like with refs, we don't use dot value inside templates. Vue automatically unwraps both refs and computed properties for us. If I start typing into either input, notice how the full name updates immediately. And the important thing is that we never update full name ourselves. Vue automatically recalculates it whenever first name or last name changes. So how does Vue know when to update the computed property? When Vue executes the function we pass to computed, it automatically tracks the reactive values used inside it. In our case, those values are first, name and last name. Whenever either of those values changes, Vue updates the computed result automatically. This means we don't have to manually keep full name in sync. Vue takes care of that for us. Let's look at one more practical example. Imagine we're building a shopping cart. We have the price of a product and the quantity selected by the user. Instead of storing the total separately, we can calculate it with a computed property. Whenever either the price or the quantity changes, Vue automatically updates the total. Computed properties aren't limited to strings. They can return numbers, booleans, arrays, objects, or almost any value you can calculate. The important thing is that the value is derived from other reactive data. So why use computed properties? One of the biggest advantages of computed properties is cleaner code. Without computed properties, we often repeat the same logic directly inside our templates. Whether it's combining a first and last name, filtering a list, or calculating a value, the same expression can appear in multiple places. Instead, we can move that logic into a computed property and reuse it anywhere in our template. The template becomes much cleaner, easier to read, and much easier to maintain. And because computed properties are reactive, they automatically update whenever their dependencies change. This gives us cleaner templates, reusable logic, easier maintenance, and automatic updates, all without repeating ourselves. Let's switch back to our previous example. Now let's see how computed properties behave behind the scenes. I'll add a console log inside our computed property. Now I'll create another reactive variable. This variable has nothing to do with our full name. I'll also add a button that increments the count value every time it's clicked. Now let's test it. I'll click the button a few times. Notice that nothing appears in the console. Computed executed doesn't appear again. Even though the component re-renders, Vue doesn't execute the computed property again. Why? Because none of its dependencies changed. Vue simply reuses the previous result. This optimization is called caching. We've seen how computed properties work. Now let's compare them with another option, methods. At first glance, they can seem very similar. But what happens if we replace our computed property with a method? Let's find out by replacing it with a method that returns the same value. Now, instead of using our computed property, let's call the method directly inside the template. The output looks exactly the same, but watch the console. Every time Vue re-renders this component, the method executes again. Even if the full name hasn't changed, Vue still calls the method because it has no way of knowing whether the result is different. Now let's switch back to our computed property. Notice what happens. The computed property only recalculates when one of its reactive dependencies changes. If nothing changes, Vue simply reuses the previously computed result. Unlike computed properties, methods are never cached. So when should you use each one? Computed properties are cached, while methods are not. That means computed properties only recalculate when their reactive dependencies change, whereas methods execute every time the component renders. Computed properties are ideal for derived values like full names, filtered lists, totals, or formatted data. Methods are better when you need to perform an action, run reusable logic, or execute code every time it's called. A simple question to ask yourself is, can this value be calculated from other reactive data? If the answer is yes, it probably belongs in a computed property. Otherwise, a method is usually the better choice. Before we finish, let's go over a few best practices. Computed properties are a great choice whenever you need to calculate a value from other reactive data. Some common examples include formatting text, combining multiple values, filtering or sorting arrays, calculating totals, determining validation status, or controlling button states. A good rule to remember is this: if a value can be calculated, it usually shouldn't be stored. Instead of creating another ref, create a computed property and let Vue keep it up to date for you. This helps you avoid unnecessary state, keeps your code cleaner, and makes your application easier to maintain. Today we learned what computed properties are and why they're such a powerful feature in Vue. We saw how to create computed properties, how Vue automatically keeps them up to date, and why they help us write cleaner, more maintainable code. We also learned how computed properties use caching for better performance, and how they differ from methods. In the next episode, we'll learn how to conditionally render elements using vif, velsif, velse, and vshow. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.